want a couple of grand out. And he's coming back to doing straw. I mean, I looked at a lot of things. Do you want to swap the can? Hazel, we don't want to leave the translator seat behind the screen. in 10 seconds. Here we go.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our press conference, Indigenous Women of the Amazon Calls to Action. My name is Osprey, Orielle, and I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, or WECAN. And we work with women from different regions of the world on the front lines of climate change, and the Amazon is very critical to all of us, and it's one of the regions we're most important to us. And one of the key focuses of our WECAN delegation at this COP is calling urgent attention to the Amazon rainforest that is in a dire crisis, and to show our solidarity with Indigenous peoples who are fighting to protect and defend the Amazon and their communities. We're very honored to have here women from across the Amazon to speak to us. First, we're going to be hearing from Maricela, Yuri, Gualinga, Santi. She is the first female vice president of the Sarayaku people of Ecuador. Then we're going to be hearing from Sonia Guadalajara. She's the executive coordinator for the Articulation of Indigenous Peoples of Brazil. And then we will be hearing from Helena Gualinga, who's a youth activist and WECAN youth program leader, also from Sarayaku in Ecuador. And I have to say that these women mean a lot to me because they are really the backbone of a lot of the Indigenous movements. And I just really want to salute all of you for your courage and incredible work. Throughout the Amazon region, Indigenous peoples are under increasing attack, with government leaders engaged in devastating assaults on social and environmental protections and direct attacks on Indigenous peoples. And as threats increase, women land defenders are harmed first and worst due to oppressive patriarchal social constructs. This is a critical time to stand with all these courageous Indigenous women leaders, and they are fighting every day to protect Indigenous rights, the Amazon, the climate, and in fact, their very lives. And I think we all need to realize that first and foremost, we should be protecting Indigenous peoples for fighting for their own territories and lands. But we need to remember that they're doing this for all of us. None of us can survive without the Amazon. We know there is no solution to lessening the devastating impacts of the climate crisis without forests. And study after study shows that Indigenous peoples are the very best custodians of forests, that they have maintained for millennia in their territories. Due to hundreds of years of oppressive colonization and current neoliberal economic systems, we see massive forest destruction from fossil fuel and mining extraction to purposeful lit fires with impunity in the Amazon from the agro-business development. All of these dangerous developments are driving the climate crisis. We, as the international community, must stand with Indigenous peoples in solidarity and resistance to demand that governments be respectful of the fundamental human rights and Indigenous rights. These standards are key, and we must protect the Amazon's ecological integrity. We are here to say loud and clear in solidarity, we do not stand for one more drop of Indigenous blood. We know that in the Amazon region, in the LAC region, Latin American region, it's one of the highest areas of attack and murder on Indigenous peoples for standing up for their territories. And that the Amazon is not for sale. We don't want carbon offsets or the commodification of the Amazon or of any forests. We do not accept the market mechanisms in Article 6 of the Rulebook for the Paris Climate Agreement that furthers harms to Indigenous peoples, their rights, and their territories. It is far past time for the governments of the world, to listen to Indigenous women's leadership and to respect their knowledge and rights. Additionally, at WECAN, we will be working with our partners in the Amazonian region to implement the Escazú Agreement that was finally ratified just last year in order to further our efforts to protect the Amazon and defend the defenders of the forest. So the Escazú Agreement is a new instrument that we will be looking at to protect women land defenders and the Amazon itself. And with that, I'm really honored to hand the floor now to Maricela, Yuri, Gualinga, Santi. Thank you.
Buenas noches con todos.
Hello, everyone.
Aquí hemos venido como mujer, como madre, como joven, a hacer escuchar nuestras voces de lucha.
I have come here as a woman, as a mother, as youth to make our voices heard.
Desde hace mucho tiempo en mi pueblo, en todos los pueblos indígenas, antes lideraban los hombres, pero ahora nos hemos dado cuenta de que nosotras también como mujer podemos liderar.
Before, you could only see men on the front lines, but we have been there, and now we have also taken upon ourselves to stand up and fight.
La lucha conjuntamente con los hombres nos hace más fuerte como humanos, que debemos defender nuestra vida, nuestra cultura, nuestras costumbres.
We are together fighting for our lands, our rights, and our culture and our practices.
Nuestra lucha como mujeres en mi pueblo contra la empresa petrolera ha sido muy importante.
The women's fight in my community against the oil companies have been very, very important.
Porque sin nosotras, los hombres capaz que se dejaban ganar esta lucha, pero nosotras le dábamos ánimo para que ellos sigan de pie en la selva junto a nosotros.
When the men were out fighting in the forest to protect our lands, we were the ones supporting them from inside of the communities.
Y así, como niños y jóvenes también, hombres y mujeres, hemos enfocado en eso de que tenemos que salir adelante, luchando por nuestra futura generación, hacer escuchar nuestras voces, que en la selva está la vida para todo el mundo.
We as a community, men, women, and children have been fighting to make sure that we can continue to live in the forest.
Y asimismo quisiera que en las comunidades, en los pueblos, haya capacitaciones a las mujeres, a las jóvenes, capacitaciones para que puedan seguir liderando en el futuro, quién sabe, llegar a liderar en altos cargos de nuestros países.
So we need to make sure that we can empower young women so that we can take leadership in these spaces. And I hope one day I can see women take up a really big space.
Y así poder defender nuestra selva y que todo lo que está ahí como indígena conocemos, como vivimos ahí, sabemos lo que es importante para nosotros.
So we can continue protecting our forest, so that we can continue our indigenous lifestyle in the forest.
Y así, para poder seguir adelante, nosotros hemos venido luchando contra esto y estamos aquí ahora, aquí en esta cumbre, para hacer escuchar lo importante que es la lucha de los pueblos, hacer escuchar a los gobiernos que hacen sus tratados y firman, pero después no hacen ver en los pueblos indígenas. No sé dónde se va todo ese dinero y los pueblos estamos, como siempre, abandonados.
So we are here at COP so that our voices are heard too. All these leaders and governments come here and sign policies, but we don't see that. We don't see those things happening back home. We don't see that in our territory. I don't know where the money is going that they say that they are giving to us.
Para que se den cuenta de que la Madre Tierra nos ha dado todo a nosotros, pero nosotros estamos encargados de destruir todo esto.
Mother Earth has given us everything, but we are destroying her.
Y ahora les pido que tomen conciencia, cada uno de nosotros como humanos, que cada uno como persona debemos salvar el mundo.
So I ask you to be conscious, because we need to save the planet. We as humans need to save the planet.
pedir a los bancos que están financiando a las empresas extractivas que dejen de financiar y que nos ayuden en otros proyectos que sería bueno para los pueblos indígenas, no en sacar el petróleo ni el oro.
So I ask everyone to help the Amazon and indigenous people, and I ask also all the banks and everyone financing and funding destruction to stop doing that. Instead, you should invest in us and you should help us instead of exploiting oil.
Y así para poder estar, la paz está en nosotros, la salvación está en la selva para todo el mundo. Gracias.
We're going to find peace in the forest. Thank you.
Olá, boa noite. Eu sou a Sonia Guadalajara, eu venho do Brasil. Estou aqui representando a APIB, que é a Articulação dos Povos Indígenas do Brasil.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sonia Guadalajara. I'm the Executive Coordinator of the Association of Indigenous People of Brazil.
Estamos aqui numa delegação de mais de 40 lideranças indígenas, que é já a maior delegação indígena do Brasil na história da COP.
We came all the way here with a delegation of over 40 indigenous leaders, which is throughout the history of COP, the greatest indigenous delegation there has ever been.
É urgente a nossa participação nesses espaços de tomada de decisão, uma vez que nossos direitos conquistados estão sendo retirados pelo governo brasileiro.
Our participation within this spaces of decision-making, it becomes really important once our basic human rights have been taken away and are being every time more stripped down by the Brazilian government.
Convivemos diariamente com o aumento do desmatamento, o aumento das queimadas, os conflitos territoriais, e tudo isso, quem são as primeiras impactadas somos nós, mulheres indígenas.
We live day by day with close encounters with deforestation, forest fires, as well as the violation of our lands. And the first people who suffer from these are indigenous women.
Nossos corpos e nossos territórios sangram ao ver comunidades inteiras vulneráveis à destruição causada por invasões, por desmatamento, por queimadas, enquanto tentam manter o isolamento para diminuir também, enquanto nós nos mantemos isolados, para diminuir também os riscos ainda da contaminação pela Covid-19.
Our bodies and our territories are bleeding when we see each time more the threats of invasions through mining, as well as wildfire, forest fires that are coming into our lands, and that's not considering when we try to isolate ourselves to protect our territories from COVID-19 and the pandemic.
Nossos espíritos sangram e choram quando vemos mortas as crianças sendo sugadas pelas dragas do garimpo ilegal.
Our spirits are crying and bleeding when we see children being murdered by the activities of illegal mining.
Como aconteceu agora recentemente com 2 crianças do povo Yanomami no estado de Roraima.
Such as what has happened just recently with 2 children from the Yanomami people in Roraima state in Brazil.
E apesar de toda essa política de extermínio dos povos indígenas praticada pelo governo Bolsonaro, nós realizamos milhares de manifestações de enfrentamento a essa política genocida.
And although we are facing this extermination policy by the Bolsonaro government in Brazil, we have yet performed hundreds and thousands of demonstrations against these measurements that are being put into place in Brazil.
Nós, mulheres indígenas, guerreiras da ancestralidade, acabamos de realizar a segunda marcha das mulheres indígenas no Brasil.
We, the indigenous women, defenders and warriors of ancestrality, have just performed our second March of Indigenous Women in Brazil.
Essa marcha teve como tema Mulheres Originárias Reflorestando Mentes para a Cura da Terra.
This march in itself has this central theme, the original women of the land reforesting the minds of people for the healing of the earth.
Nossas ações foram grandes e efetivas para denunciar o governo brasileiro e também para motivar outras partes do mundo que as mulheres indígenas também unam-se a nós para o fortalecimento da nossa unidade.
Our actions have taken place in great measurements, and we have invited women from all over the world, but also denounced on our governments. Our wish is to invite many other territories that are going through the same struggles to join our cause.
Estamos nos organizando também para 2022 lançarmos as campanhas das mulheres indígenas e fortalecer a candidatura de mulheres indígenas para a ocupação dos espaços na política institucional.
We also are executing the plan to have more women taking up political spaces in 2022 elections in Brazil, and we are incentivizing indigenous women to take on those roles.
Nós estamos diante de imenso desafio e precisamos cada vez mais ser sementes, alimentar essa força que vem da origem dos processos vitais e está conectada com os ciclos da natureza.
We each time more need to be seeds. Just as seeds, we cultivate the force of the vital processes of life and sprouts into action.
Nós sabemos o que precisa ser plantado hoje, para que amanhã nosso futuro possa germinar.
We know what needs to be planted today so that tomorrow our future can be germinated out of it.
E por isso nós viemos aqui para dizer que é urgente demarcar os territórios indígenas. Sem esse reconhecimento dos povos e territórios, não haverá solução para a crise climática.
And for this reason, we come here to say that the demarcation of indigenous territories is urgent. Without our lands being recognized our own, there is no solution for the climate crisis.
E por isso, nós, mulheres indígenas, estamos aqui com um chamado global para o reflorestar mentes.
And for this reason, we as indigenous women are here to give a global call for the reforestation of minds.
É urgente reflorestar o pensamento, as ideias e os corações, porque só a consciência dos humanos trará a cura para a Mãe Terra.
It is urgent that we reforest our minds, our thoughts, and our actions, because it is only human consciousness that will be able to reforest Earth itself.
Estamos aqui também para dizer que não vamos aceitar nenhum financiamento ou investimentos que desconsiderem a participação dos povos indígenas.
We are also here to say that we will not be accepting any funding or incentive that does not consider the participation of indigenous people.
Porque o território é o nosso corpo e o nosso espírito. E nós, povos indígenas, somos parte da solução para a crise planetária.
Because our territories are our bodies and our spirits, and we as indigenous people are the solution for the global crisis that we are facing.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Helena, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Elena Walinga. I'm 19 and I come from the same community as Maricela, from the Sarayaku community in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Right now, we've probably all heard about the situation in the Amazon and how it's not getting to the tipping point, but we are at the tipping point. And in the Ecuadorian Amazon right now, the oil exploration is expected to double under the coming years, and that is extremely, extremely concerning. But even before that happened, oil has been a very big issue for indigenous communities and the Ecuadorian Amazon before. We have oil spills happening every month, and we're not even talking about that. There's no media coverage when that happens. And it's really concerning how accepted it is, not only on an international level, but also within our own countries, how people are okay with oil spills happening on indigenous lands and indigenous children being without water for years. With the announcement of the president of my country, Lasso, of the Marine Reserve, a lot of people congratulated him. But I think it was the easy way out to come here and have this environmentalist discourse, but not actually talk about what they're doing to the Amazon at the same time. And we don't actually know what effort is going to be put into actually protecting the Marine Reserve. But we need to talk about the Amazon too. We need to talk about what is happening in the Amazon and what the Ecuadorian state is doing to the Amazon. New oil platforms are being built, and new roads are going further and further into the Amazon, penetrating the lands of the indigenous people that are in voluntary in isolation. That is not only disrespecting indigenous people, they're actually breaking international laws and policies that they have signed on to. And these are the same people that are here at COP and that are negotiating in our names and saying that they were representing us. They are not. That's why we need to be here, so that we can tell our own stories and that we can tell you what is actually going on the ground, because that is the reality. Indigenous people are every day criminalized for defending territories. Every day there is persecution. Every day people are facing the environmental destructions left behind by the fossil fuel industry. Climate change is here. And we don't really have time to be negotiating right now. We don't really have time to negotiate the Amazon's future, because the Amazon has been suffering for too long, not just only by climate change, but also by what is causing climate change. So we need to phase out from fossil fuel, and indigenous people have been saying that for so long. We have been fighting the fossil fuel industry for decades now. And it's a responsibility of our governments, of the governments of the countries that have Amazonian land, but it's also the responsibility of global leaders in other countries. We need a global effort so we can do a just transition. We need global leaders, and we need other countries to support countries like mine so that we can have a just transition. The Amazon is at a point where it might disappear, and we need to do something about that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your really powerful comments. And know that these women have been fighting on the front lines, risking their lives to protect their lands and territories. And I just wanted to pick up on a point as we close here that the women brought up around a lot of these different industries. We need to include both governments and financial institutions in addressing the fossil fuel industry. And a big question we're bringing to the COP is, where are the leaders who are going to stand up to the fossil fuel industry? 60 of the largest banks in the world have collectively financed $3.8 trillion in fossil fuel companies since the Paris Agreement. So we're, as a world, continuing to invest. Where's the regulation by the government to stop this fossil fuel financing? And the recent report by the UN Environment Program found that governments still plan to produce more than double the amount of fossil fuels in 2030 than what would be consistent with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. And there's been some commitments made here this week, but not enough. So we need to see comprehensively the fight that these women are presenting to us and the extractive industries that the whole world is involved in, whether it's financial institutions, world governments. They're calling out, this is their calling out, their cry from the Amazon that is at the tipping point, and we all need to roll up our sleeves and to support these women from the Amazon and protect their rights, their territories, and their calls to action. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause.
Food's shit, isn't it? It's better today, apparently. Is it? That's what I've been told. That's what I've been told.